Previously, on the Crazy Train.
I want to have a clock with go on my eye.
Phontaine gets duped by a friend and loses his life savings.
We were going to be homeless in a matter of hours.
The Judds' oldest daughter, Tia, gets harassed and sexually traumatized at church.
Caleb confronted Jacob and said, "Hey, don't touch my sister."
And Tia becomes suicidal.
I couldn't get her to make any sort of eye contact.
A predatory neighbor named Jerry Glass takes advantage of Tia and hides her from the Judds for 2 weeks.
What are Jerry's motives here? What is going on?
When the police refuse to help the Judds bring their daughter home,
He said any kid 12 and older can live wherever they want.
Tia's younger brother Caleb goes to rescue her.
I got this.
Jerry Glass and her daughter-in-law Tiffany Wilson fight Caleb. Then Phontaine arrives and gets his daughter to safety. But the police dismiss witnesses, ignore protocol, and arrest Phontaine.
Is this a joke?
Officer Stacy Patterson files an inaccurate CPS report and has Tia taken away from the Judd family.
It was my daughter. This was my daughter.
Phontaine finally gets a job and is able to hire representation.
It didn't matter what the cost was. We needed to get a lawyer.
Now, after waiting a year, Phontaine finally goes to trial to clear his name. In May 2019, days before their trial was scheduled to begin, Hannah and Phontaine sat down with their lawyer, David Bonilla, for the first time.
At this point, we didn't know what to expect. We had no idea if the public defender who said that my husband was going to be incarcerated for 2 years, if she was right. We had no idea if our kids were going to be taken away from us. Our stress levels were really high.
I was glad to finally talk to him and discuss our case. I had hired him back in October, which had been like 7 months. I was actually really surprised how long it took to finally meet with him and talk.
The Judds started the meeting by telling Mr. Bonilla what happened that day at the park. They also tried to give Mr. Bonilla the complex backstory that led up to the park incident, but Mr. Bonilla was incredulous.
We were just trying to tell him everything, and he kept stopping us saying, no, I already know all that. And we knew that he didn't know all that, because how could he? We hadn't told him, and it certainly wasn't in the police report.
The Judds found out that Mr. Bonilla had not yet watched the video. He had only read the police report and talked to the Judds' daughter Tia the previous fall. Mr. Bonilla had the Judds listen to Tia's deposition in its entirety, where she was still defending Jerry Glass and claiming abuse.
I don't want her getting prosecuted, and I'm
Who?
honestly Jerry Glass.
Yeah, Jerry's not being prosecuted. Jerry's not charged with anything.
The whole recording was so bizarre and so inaccurate, but Mr. Bonilla didn't know that. So when he finally met us, he thought he knew us and what we were all about. I don't think he realized I was innocent. I think his goal was to minimize my sentence, not prove I was innocent.
The Judds told Mr. Bonilla that the police report was not accurate, but Mr. Bonilla did not believe it. After all, why would the police lie? And why did all the officers' stories match? It did not make sense.
So we asked him for body cam footage because that would prove what they said and what happened, and it would totally exonerate us.
Mr. Bonilla said he would look into it. A few days later, Hannah took Tank to his long-awaited doctor appointment with the pediatric ophthalmologist, who promptly diagnosed Tank with a dermoid cyst.
He explained that a dermoid cyst will grow body tissues like hair, skin, and even teeth, and that the temple is a typical location where those types of cysts will be found. He said it definitely needed to be surgically removed.
The doctor explained that an accidental fall or bump can cause the cyst to rupture.
He said they can cause a life-threatening infection in the brain, and he had actually seen that multiple times in his career, and he assured us, you don't want that.
Hannah asked if there was a chance it would heal and go away on its own. The doctor told her that this type of cyst never goes away on its own. It only gets bigger, and he referred the Judds to a surgeon to get the cyst removed. The next day, on May 15th, Phontain's case went to trial in Superior Court in Sacramento, California. It had been almost exactly a year since that day at the park when Phontaine got arrested. Phontaine had very high expectations going to court.
Going to trial was terrifying and exciting and a huge relief all at the same time.
Hannah and Phontaine met with David Bonilla at his office near the courthouse. He informed them he was unable to obtain any body cam footage because Sacramento County sheriffs did not have body cams. Mr. Bonilla then told the Judds he had decided to not use the park video as part of the defense.
I was shocked when he said he wasn't going to use it. I was sure that was the thing that was going to exonerate us. He said he showed it to other lawyers and they said that we shouldn't use it because it looked violent.
You cannot take my daughter from me!
He also mentioned the whole duct tape thing and how it might look to a jury, but also how the prosecution might try to use it against me. It was just too dangerous to use the video, and it wasn't a chance he was willing to take.
He had a point. I recalled when we showed Bishop Holt the video, he got visibly startled. If you don't know what was going on, it would look really bad, especially if it were taken out of context.
Phontaine was very disappointed in Mr. Bonilla's decision.
I was thinking it was a major mistake to not use the video. I remember thinking, how's he going to win? How's he going to prove what happened? But it didn't matter because we were literally on our way to the courthouse, so there was no chance to discuss or argue.
Phontaine and Mr. Bonilla walked over to the courthouse, followed by Hannah, Caleb, and Trixie. The other Judd kids were back home with some friends from church, Sondra Brown and Melanie Ferguson, who offered to care for the children while the rest of the family was in court.
How do you feel?
I'm surprisingly calm. I think part of the issue is, my lawyer asked me before this, he's like, they offered a plea deal, and I'm like, I'm not going to take a plea deal. You know why, right? And he goes, actually, I don't. I said, 2 reasons. One, if I take a plea deal, it means I'm guilty of something, which I'm not. But 2, if I'm not completely exonerated and all the charges are dropped and I'm found completely, totally, 100% innocent, I will never get my name cleared with CPS, and that'll haunt me the rest of my life. But more importantly, I think, is the first reason, which is I'm innocent. I literally did nothing wrong. And in fact, I did everything right. I was trying to protect my daughter.
If things went sideways, we weren't just at risk of jail time. We weren't just at risk of losing our jobs or our home. We were at risk of losing our younger children. We were told that the only way we could dispute the CPS conviction was if we walked out of court found not guilty of all charges.
Fontaine's case was assigned to Judge Gaversa. Their lawyer, David Bonilla, revealed he had never had any interactions with Judge Gaversa and was unsure of his style and mindsets.
I remember when I was in the law office and I saw a little sign that said, good lawyers know the law, great lawyers know the judge. And I remember thinking, David Bonilla doesn't know the judge. How's that going to pan out?
The first step of the trial was for the lawyers to present their motions to the judge.
From what I understand, motions in limine are basically setting up rules for the game. The decisions made at this point have a profound effect on the outcome of the trial.
The prosecution proposed a motion to avoid all discussion about Tia's past and her suicidal behavior, but David Bonilla disagreed. He argued that Tia's past was important to the case. Judge Gaversa ruled that neither lawyer could bring up Tia's past unless a witness did first.
So that meant that everything that happened at the altercation at the park wouldn't have any context or explanation. Basically, we weren't going to be allowed to talk about anything that happened in the past.
Judge Gaversa justified his decision by saying Phontaine would have the opportunity to testify and clarify.
He can explain his state of mind and why he acted the way he did, and the jury can decide whether or not it was reasonable.
Judge Gaversa also allowed as evidence the 911 call from that day at the park.
Hello, this is 911. Do you have an emergency?
Mr. Bonilla objected to its admission because the portion the prosecution wanted to use occurred before Phontaine had even arrived at the park, and that portion sounded very intense.
There's a lot of yelling and screaming. It might sound more dangerous of a situation than what it is.
The judge disregarded Mr. Bonilla's objection and ruled to allow the prosecution to use the 911 call anyway. And with that, the first day of the trial was over. Phontaine returned to court the next day for jury selection. Approximately 60 potential jurors filled the room. One by one, the lawyers dismissed potential jurors until the 12 jury seats were filled.
The jury selection process is kind of like a game.
Tim, JJ, Daryl.
It's like picking teams, only in reverse. At first, everyone is on the team, but then one by one, players get dismissed until only 12 remain, plus 2 alternates.
You dismiss players you don't want in the game, but you can only dismiss so many. And if you end up dismissing the wrong ones, you could end up with a team that's stacked against you.
Phontaine found the process fascinating, but also troubling.
One thing that really bothered me about the jury was that it's supposed to be a jury of my peers, yet most of the jurors didn't have kids. It was unfortunate, but then I realized that most of the people with kids are the ones who get out of jury duty.
When the selection was over, the judge dismissed everyone for the weekend. On Monday morning, the Judds headed back downtown. They met with Mr. Bonilla and headed over to the courthouse. The judge brought in the jury, and the third day of the trial began. Judge Gaversa started by reading to the jury the 4 misdemeanor charges against Phontaine.
Count 1 alleges that on May 5th, that Mr. Judd unlawfully committed an assault on Tiffany Wilson by means of force, likely to produce great bodily injury. Count 2 is commonly referred to as child abuse. It alleges that Mr. Judd, on May 5th, willfully and unlawfully inflicted on Tia Judd, who was 17 at the time, unjustifiable pain or mental suffering. Count 3 is commonly referred to as false imprisonment. It alleges that Mr. Judd on May 5th unlawfully violated the personal liberty of Tia Judd. And Count 4 is the charge of battery. It alleges that on May 5th, Mr. Judd willfully and unlawfully used force and violence upon Tiffany Wilson.
The judge then instructed the jury.
Your verdict must be based only on the evidence presented during trial in this court and the law, as I provide it to you.
I realized the judge has a lot of power. He's the one who decides what evidence can or cannot be presented, as well as what laws the jury can consider.
Judge Gaversa then turned to the jury and gave them a brief explanation of what child abuse and false imprisonment were.
A parent is not guilty of child abuse or false imprisonment if he or she used justifiable physical force to discipline a child.
He explained child abuse and false imprisonment against Tia, but made no mention of the assault and battery against Tiffany. I didn't understand, why didn't he explain what assault was and what battery was and all that? Why only explain half the charges to the jury? Was that normal?
After the judge stated the charges against Phontaine, the prosecution gave their opening statement. According to the DA, Phontaine was the mastermind behind the altercation at the park. He orchestrated the whole thing, all in an attempt to punish Tia, Jerry, and Tiffany. It was a relatively simple case. Phontaine was an angry person who got mad at Jerry for hiding his daughter from him, so he ignored police advice and went vigilante.
His theory was essentially the same as the police report. He basically reiterated that fairy tale the police had written and presented it as fact.
In Mr. Bonilla's opening statement, he suggested Phontaine was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Phontaine was worried about his daughter's safety, but appeals to the police didn't work. What was he supposed to do? He did his best in an impossible situation.
I thought my lawyer was really well spoken, but what he told the jury wasn't what actually happened. Part of it was the restrictions placed on him by the judge, but part of it was, I don't think he knew. It was odd because I thought when you went to court, it was all about the truth, but what was being presented was like this watered down version of what actually happened.
Since Hannah was a potential witness, she was not allowed in the courtroom during the proceedings.
My kids and I just sat out in the hallway waiting. We had no idea what was going on or how well it was going. It was a little suspenseful.
After opening statements, the prosecution called in their first witness, Phontaine's daughter, Tia. The Judds weren't entirely sure what Tia was going to say when she got on the stand. They knew she had been attending counseling while out at college and had made progress, but they also knew she had not completely recovered from the sexual harassment or the social stigma from Logan and others. The prosecution started by asking Tia about going to the Glasses house.
I just intended to stay there for a few days, but they were like, you can stay here for as long as you want and just let things go. And there's kind of a tacit pressure to stay there. I felt obligated to stay there since they bought me food and they took care of me.
Tia explained that she had not been completely honest with the police, that she had not actually been kicked out of the house, and that her father never hit or struck her at any point. Her black eye was not true either.
Did you have a black eye?
I don't think so.
Do you remember telling an officer that you had a black eye?
For the record, I do not remember having told anything to the officers except for when I was in the hospital. When they interviewed me, I was in hysterics.
The prosecution then showed Tia a picture from the day at the park to show the jury the extent of Tia's supposed injuries, but the picture was not convincing.
Does your eye appear swollen to you on this picture?
That looks like my face at any given day.
So it is your testimony that you don't think your right eye is swollen in that picture?
No, that just looks like me with no mascara on.
I was really pleased to see her trying to set things right and to tell the truth.
During her testimony, Tia mentioned she had gotten alcohol from Jerry Glass's house and that Jerry Glass was critical of Tia's religion. Tia also explained how she had been very difficult and had caused a lot of the problems at home before she left.
I was being a terror. This incident came about because of my behavior, and I'm very ashamed of that. I am ashamed of my actions. And I'm also frustrated because I never believed that my dad should have been on trial for any of this. My dad was just trying to, and this is in retrospect, my dad was just trying to get his little girl back home, and this is where we are now. I expressed it to the officers at the hospital. I said, my dad should not be in jail. My dad should not be on trial.
Mr. Bonilla continued his cross-examination, asking more questions about Jerry's behavior.
Did you think it was odd Jerry Glass didn't take the initiative as an adult to call your father and let him know that, hey, we have your daughter?
I think it's very odd. Why would you allow a minor to stay at your home without, talking to the parents? I don't know what her motives were, but it's very odd.
Later in her testimony, Tia confirmed what the Judds had recently learned about Stacey Patterson. Patterson was the one who told Tia to not leave Jerry's house.
The female officer deputy is alerting you that your parents can take you if you're on non-private property. Were you somehow warned or something from deputies that your parents might try to take you if you're on non-private property?
Yes.
And you did not go across the street with the officers. Is that what you said?
No, because they told me if I was in a public place, they could just grab me.
Towards the end of her testimony, Tia detailed what happened at the park, particularly how Jerry was trying to hurt Caleb.
I saw her scratching at him. I saw her trying to punch him. I remember her grabbing at him and clawing at him with her nails and also just trying to punch at him and hit at him. She accidentally hit me. Fists were flying.
Okay,
yes,
so hold on a second. You just said that during the skirmish in the car that Jerry Glass is punching from the back seat and she actually hit you in the front area of the car?
Yes, she was just kind of lashing out at trying to get my brother.
Where do you recall her hitting you at?
I think it was the side of my face. I was like, oh.
Later, while visiting Tia at the hospital, Jerry shared how she managed to hurt Caleb.
She said, I took my hands like this and scratched him.
Phontaine was getting upset hearing about Jerry's actions.
Jerry Glass had stolen my daughter, and then when my teenage son bravely went to go try to get her back, Jerry Glass was there hitting and scratching at him. But then to be bragging to Tia about it at the hospital? What a monster. And then Jerry's the one who punched my daughter. That's why Tia had a bloody nose. She got punched in the face by Jerry, and I was the one getting blamed for it.
Tia's testimony ended with her discounting the statements she had given to the police when she was under duress.
Do you believe that you were relaying accurate information to them?
No, not at all. I was just freaking out. Some of those things I said were not accurate. I was just emotional at the time. I was not able to really control what I was saying, and I read the police report. I don't remember making those statements. I was freaking out, so...
You're not saying that now or pointing out that there were a lot of inaccuracies or untruths just to protect your father now, are you?
No, not at all. It's just facts. The record is inaccurate.
After Tia's testimony, the prosecution called Jerry Glass. The Judds did not know what to make of Jerry. Her actions had been strange from the very first time they met her.
When I first met Jerry Glass, she told me point blank, "I hate Mormons."
And now that the Judds had attended the sex trafficking meeting, Jerry's behavior seemed even more troubling. The Judds had learned that there are 6 stages of sex trafficking. Stage 1 involves older adults befriending a minor and giving gifts. They typically target teenage girls with low self-esteem who are from poorer families.
That explained why Jerry had specifically requested Tia to work for her, because Tia was still struggling with being sexually harassed, and our family was extremely poor at the time.
It also explained why Jerry was getting Tia gifts, like buying her clothes, getting her a phone, and promising to get her a car.
The Glasses, they're going to take care of me, might get me a car so I can drive around.
Stage 2 involves intoxication, where the predator introduces drugs and alcohol to the minor, all in an attempt to make the minor feel grown up and independent.
That explained why Jerry had started drinking in front of Tia and was encouraging Tia to drink as well, saying things like, "Well, you can drink as long as I'm supervising you."
And I was like, "Look at this alcohol. I know it tastes like this. I know it tastes like this."
It also explained why Tia was saying, "I'm not on drugs, I'm not on drugs, I'm not on drugs," when we found her at the park. Most likely she was on something.
The third stage of trafficking is an attempt to alienate the minor from their family. The predator will try to convince the minor that their parents do not love them and are just trying to control them.
That explained many of Jerry's comments in the police report. Why she was telling the police things like how extreme our religion was, how we were abusive, how our home wasn't safe for any of our kids, even though she knew that wasn't true. It's what she was telling Tia, and it's what she was telling the police to justify her actions and redirect the focus off of her.
I noticed Tia's language and behavior changed after she had been working for Jerry for a while. That's when Tia started telling us that we were abusive and started telling her younger siblings that we didn't love them and that we just were trying to control them.
Stage 4 is when the predator creates times to be alone with the minor and attempts to isolate the minor from friends and family.
That would explain why Jerry kept asking Tia to spend more and more time cleaning her house. It eventually got to the point where Tia was spending the entire day with Jerry.
This isolation tactic explained why Jerry Glass later hid Tia from us for 2 weeks, didn't tell anyone where she was, and was monitoring Tia's communications.
Stage 5 occurs when the predator tries to desensitize the minor. They denounce the minor's moral beliefs and attack their ethical boundaries. This is often referred to as brainwashing.
That would explain why Jerry would follow Tia around while she was working, telling Tia that there was no God, criticizing Tia's religion, calling it extreme. Jerry also told Tia that she and her spouse had an open marriage. She was sharing with my 16-year-old daughter details about her sexual relationships.
The final stage of the grooming process is where the predator capitalizes on the relationship by selling the minor to a third party. Oftentimes, this includes obtaining the minor's legal documents such as social security numbers, birth certificates, and bank account information, which gives the predator significant power and control over the victim.
That explained why Jerry Glass was pressuring Tia to get her legal documents, to the point of Tia breaking into our home while we're at church and then trying to trick her younger brother to sneak them to her. And why Tia even tried to convince Officer Patterson to get them for her.
I needed my IDs out of my house because I can't get emancipated unless I can prove that I have a job. So I can't get a license, I can't transport myself. So I need my IDs, and it's a lot of work to get them.
As part of the final stage of sex trafficking, a predator will often use individuals, referred to as mules, to traffic victims. The mules are typically kept uninformed as to the intentions or details of the predator. This allows the predator to distance themselves from the actual act of transportation and reduce their own risk of detection and apprehension.
I think Jerry was planning on using Tiffany as a mule. As her mother-in-law, Jerry knew Tiffany was an abuse victim, and Tiffany would relate to Tia's supposed plight. And so Jerry told Tiffany that Tia was being abused and was trapped in her own home.
She left home because she's being abused. She didn't want to be there.
It made sense why Tiffany was fighting so hard to keep Tia, despite the fact that she had only met her a few hours prior. She thought she was protecting Tia because she truly believed her mother-in-law's story. She was ignorant of what Jerry's motives and intentions were.
Jerry knew Tia was not being abused and Tia was not in danger, which explained why Jerry was just standing there watching as her daughter-in-law was struggling in the car. And then why, at the end of the altercation, when Tiffany was all riled up about Tia getting taken away, Jerry was just nonchalant. Yeah, come on, let's go.
She didn't want to be there. Come on, let's go. I'm calling you.
It's because Jerry knew the story was false, but Tiffany did not.
A lot of Jerry's actions led the Judds to believe she was trying to traffic their daughter, which was particularly troubling to them because they understood Jerry was a government worker who dealt with juveniles. Her position would make it easier for her to traffic and less likely she would ever get caught. Now that they were in court, the Judds were hoping the facts would come out and demonstrate to the jury that the wrong person was on trial.
Were you aware of whether or not Tia was in contact with her parents?
Email only. I did see emails. She showed them to me.
You would acknowledge that they would have no way of knowing who's actually typing the email, correct?
True.
The Judds were not surprised to learn that Jerry was reading Tia's emails, and they later confirmed with Tia that Jerry had in fact been helping write them. The police report included many derogatory statements Jerry had made about the Judds' religion, so the prosecution attempted to show Jerry's actions were not motivated by bigotry.
And Mrs. Glass, do you have anything against the Mormon religion?
No, I've got several family members that are Mormon.
Mr. Bonilla's cross-examination helped clarify for the jury.
Did you express to Tia Judd that you had a bias against the Mormon religion?
I told her it wasn't our religion and it wasn't something that we believed in.
Did you express to her that you had a bad experience with Mormons in the past and that was the root of your displeasure with that religion?
Yeah, I did have a few bad experiences.
Okay, so while she's a minor cleaning in your house, you may have actually delved into some of these conversations with her?
We may have, yes.
Did Mr. Judd ever express to you that he was aware of some of these conversations that you had regarding you talking about his religion to his daughter?
No.
The Judds wanted to show the jury that Jerry was not motivated by altruism. Unfortunately, Mr. Bonilla did not delve as deep as the Judds wanted. Instead, he focused on Jerry's behavior leading up to the altercation at the park.
Tia shows up at your house April 23rd, right?
Yes.
And at that point, you do not take any initiative yourself to contact either Mr. Judd or his wife that she is there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. She'd been at your house for at least a week, and even during that entire time, you never took an initiative either. You had Mr. Judd's phone number. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you knew where he lived, right?
Correct.
And you never took the initiative to either leave a note on their door to make sure that they knew or called him, correct?
Correct.
Tia Judd, she is under 18 at that time, correct?
Correct.
And you knew that?
Yes.
At that point, Phontaine thought there was enough information for there to be an investigation into Jerry Glass. She knew Tia was a minor, and she admitted to criticizing Tia's religion and then hiding her from her parents.
At any point before the incident at the park, did you indicate to the defendant that Tia Judd was free to leave your house whenever she wanted?
No.
A normal adult would have at least called the child's parents and let them know that their kid was there, or called the police. Instead, this woman had kept my daughter hidden at her house for an extended period of time without telling anyone.
What happened after the officers left?
After they left, I went down to get a whiteboard. When I came back, Tia had said that she was going to go meet her brother down at the park.
Phontaine found Jerry's claim oddly specific. He did not believe that immediately after the police left, Jerry felt the sudden need to go get a whiteboard for Tia to take to school, and he wondered what Jerry had really gone to go do. The rest of Jerry's testimony revolved around the altercation at the park.
Tia alerted you that she wanted to go to the park to meet her brother, Caleb Judd, on May 5th, right?
If that's the date, yes.
Okay. And she let you know that she trusted her brother, correct?
Yes.
And she did not have a desire at that time for you to go with her, correct?
Correct.
So you interjected yourself into that situation as far as meeting her brother, right?
Yes.
Jerry revealed she knew Tia wanted to go to the park by herself, but Jerry had interjected herself and insisted on accompanying Tia anyway. Phontaine then made a troubling realization. He figured the reason Jerry insisted was because she heard Caleb was bringing Tia's legal documents. That would explain why, when Jerry realized the documents were fake, Jerry got upset and started hitting Caleb.
She was just kind of like lashing out at like trying to get my brother.
I tried to pull his hair, and I hit him in the back.
I saw her scratching at him. I saw her trying to punch him. I remember her grabbing at him and like clawing at him with her nails and also just trying to like punch at him and hit at him.
But then when Mr. Bonilla tried to clarify, Jerry backtracked, saying she did not really hit Caleb after all.
You also testified that you hit him, right?
Yes, I think I did. I think I did hit him in the back.
Did you hit him with a closed fist?
No.
Well, I thought you just testified that you hit him.
I brought my hand down hard and I grabbed his jacket, his jersey, his shirt, and tried to pull him off.
Okay, so now you're testifying you pulled him.
I tried to pull him.
Okay. But did you also hit him, correct?
I'm assuming so, yes.
And how many times did you hit at Caleb?
Maybe twice. I tried to pull his hair and I tried to pull his clothes.
And then you also scratched him?
No, I didn't scratch him.
Phontaine knew Jerry was not being truthful. She had repeatedly hit Caleb with a closed fist and had scratched him all over his body.
She's up there basically bragging how she's hurting this teenage boy and had orchestrated this whole mess.
Were you struck at any point by the defendant?
No.
At any point did you see the defendant strike your daughter-in-law?
I did not.
While testifying, Jerry made unsolicited remarks regarding individuals videotaping the altercation.
And then someone from the city parks arrived?
Yeah, there was a city park person that was already there. And actually, by the time this whole thing happened, it was probably 5 or 6 people that were videotaping it.
Jerry later claimed the number was closer to 10.
You have to understand that there were probably about 10 other people there videotaping it.
That explains why she acted the way she did that day. She knew she'd get in trouble for hitting my son or saying or doing anything on video.
Phontaine realized that once Jerry thought there were people videotaping, she put on an act of innocent old lady.
That's why she was just standing there in the video.
As the prosecution and the defense started asking Jerry more questions about her involvement at the park, Jerry's demeanor changed and she stopped volunteering information.
I realized it was because she believed it was all on video, and she was afraid she was going to get in trouble. She wanted the questioning to end, and the best way to do that was to claim she didn't see anything, or hear anything, or know anything.
Did it appear she was part of a struggle?
I don't know.
And then it was only after that that you see Mr. Judd come around to the front passenger side of the car, right?
I don't know if it was after that, during that.
He didn't go into the driver's side, right?
Not that I saw, no.
Because Trixie is there, right?
Not that I saw. I didn't see him there.
Okay. And so you see him, but you do see him at the passenger side, and you see him pull Tia Judd out of the car.
I don't know how he got her out of the car.
Did you see Caleb grab Tia Judd and help her go to the SUV? Did he also have a hold of her?
I did not see at that point. I don't know. I didn't see.
Phontaine knew Jerry was not being truthful. In the video, she had a perfect view of everything going on, and she was just standing there watching. He figured she was just trying to cover up her involvement and feign ignorance. Jerry finished her testimony and was dismissed by the judge to sit in the hall with the other witnesses. Phontaine was disappointed. Nobody delved into Jerry's grooming behavior. Nobody questioned her about sex trafficking, and Jerry was not convicted of anything.
She wasn't the one on trial, and now she's moved out of the state.
The whole time I was sitting out in the hall with my older kids because they might be called in as witnesses. And it was kind of weird because every time the jury came out, they were like looking at us, and I could tell they were like observing us and trying to make up their minds whether or not we were good people. What was even weirder is that we were required to sit out in the hall with Jerry Glass and the officers. There wasn't like a dividing room to keep people separate.
After Jerry Glass finished her testimony, the prosecution called their next witness, Tiffany Wilson.
She started off crying, and she was crying the entire time. She even was crying as she was stating her own name for the record.
When the Judds originally saw Tiffany, they thought she was a sex worker who was actively trying to traffic Tia. Now, however, having seen the video and having just heard Jerry's testimony, the Judds believed Tiffany was being used as a mule.
I felt bad for her. I even wrote on my notepad to maybe buy her some flowers once this whole thing was over.
She was crying in the hallway before she went into court, and she was crying in the hallway after court. I remember her mother-in-law, Jerry, kind of seemed to be getting annoyed with her about it. You could tell Tiffany was an abuse victim, but she was blaming the wrong people. My husband did not abuse her, and neither did anyone in my family.
The prosecution started off by asking Tiffany if Tia had access to alcohol, and Tiffany's response surprised Phontaine.
Did you have any knowledge about whether or not she was drinking alcohol at Mrs. Glass's house?
No, Tia does not drink.
And how long had you known Tia at this point?
Just that weekend.
Tiffany's admission that she had just met Tia brought up several questions for Phontaine. First, how did she know Tia didn't drink if she had just met her a few hours prior? How is it that Tiffany had never met Tia before, despite Tia working every weekend at Jerry's house for several months? And if the 60-mile drive from her home in Live Oak was a deterrent for visits, why did Tiffany suddenly opt to visit Jerry right after the Judds called the police? The timing seemed suspicious. The prosecution asked Tiffany about her visit with Officer Patterson.
Did the police come and talk to you again?
They did come back to the house. They confirmed that Tia was there of her own free will. And they also informed us that if Tia leaves the property and her parents obtain her, they have every right to do so.
And so Tia Judd was going to meet her brother. And so you chose to intervene or to get yourself in that situation and take her to the park, right? It wasn't her idea. It was your idea.
I did because I was worried for her. She wanted to walk there by herself.
What car did you drive?
My blue Ford Focus.
And who was in the car?
I was in the driver's seat, Tia was in the front passenger seat, and Jerry Glass was in the rear passenger seat directly behind Tia.
Phontaine found the situation odd. Why were both women in the car with Tia? And why was Jerry sitting behind Tia? And why did they take Tiffany's car instead of Jerry's?
And so when you saw Tia Judd's family there, you had an idea that they may be trying to take her because that's what the police had just alerted you that they had a right to do, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're at the park, right?
Yes, sir.
And you're aware that the police had explained some rights to the Judd family, right? And you were privy to that, right? They explained it to you, too.
Yes, sir.
And so when you saw them at the park, you knew what this situation was about, right?
I had a suspicion, sir.
Did you know that she was under 18?
Yes, sir.
Tiffany had just told the jury she knew Tia was a minor, that the Judds had the legal right to get her, and that Tiffany was probably breaking the law by keeping her.
I put my arms around her and held onto my steering wheel.
But Tiffany instead chose to fight the Judds at the park. At that point, the prosecution requested to play the 911 call to the jury. Fontaine's lawyer objected. The phone call was very dramatic, filled with lots of yelling and screaming. Mr. Bonilla explained that Phontaine was not at the park at the time of the phone call, and therefore any yelling and screaming was not caused by him, and playing the recording would only serve to associate Phontaine with violence.
Any objection at this time?
Your Honor, just so the record is clear, the objections were already noted in the motions in limine, and you ruled on that, so I wanted to preserve that.
Yes, thank you. All right, so I'm just going to say you objected and I overruled. How about that?
The jury heard the recording.
911, what's your emergency?
I want to be clear. I was not there. The only purpose in playing the 911 call was to portray me in a bad light. It's called character assassination. I wasn't even there. Yet the judge allowed the prosecution to play it as if I had been there. I mean, they could have shown pictures of people clubbing baby seals or images of the Holocaust because I wasn't there either. Playing this seemingly violent audio recording only served to make me look bad and appear violent. The jury would associate me with what happened on the tape, even though I wasn't even there.
I could hear it out in the hallway, and it was disturbing. I had seen the video. I knew what had happened, yet somehow the 911 audio was way more disturbing. Even though I knew what happened, when you heard that audio, you couldn't help but envision the worst. It sounded like somebody was getting raped or murdered, or like there was a massacre going on where people were getting killed. And later, when the jury walked out in the hall, I could tell they were disturbed too. It totally influenced their opinion of the whole situation.
Quite frankly, I think it should have come with an admonition from the judge that I wasn't there, because I don't think the jury realized that I wasn't there. Did I mention that I wasn't even there?
Tiffany then gave an account of what happened when Phontaine arrived at the park.
He started ripping on Tia and punching me in my arms and my hands.
Was he hitting you with an open hand or a closed fist?
Both.
Was he saying anything while he did it?
Just let go, you
The video shows when Phontaine arrived at the park, he did not hit Tiffany, nor did he hit her as he was leaving. When he was inside the car, Jerry was there watching, and she had just testified that Phontaine did not strike Tiffany while he was inside the car either.
Were you struck at any point by the defendant?
No.
At any point did you see the defendant strike your daughter-in-law?
I did not.
As he sat there listening to Jerry Glass and Tiffany Wilson testify, Phontaine could not help but wonder how anything they had done was legal, and he was hoping the judge would recognize their actions as criminal and have them arrested. But he was about to be sorely disappointed in that hope.
You gotta keep them separated.
Some people wonder how we get our hair done so nice.
Separated. Hey!